I grew up in a village where nights were usually so quiet that you could tell which neighbor had gone to sleep just by when their courtyard light went out. Our house stood a little apart from the others, past a line of low mud walls and two neem trees that leaned toward the lane as if they were trying to listen. It was an old house, the kind that had been repaired so many times that no one could say what the original walls looked like. My father had added a cement room in front years earlier. My mother still preferred the older back portion because it stayed cooler through most of the day. A narrow hallway ran from the main door straight through the middle of the house. The bathroom was near the back. A short flight of unfinished stairs led up to the roof. In summer, we sometimes slept upstairs, but in the months when this happened, we were mostly sleeping inside again because the nights had started to turn cold. There was nothing unusual about our life then. My father woke before dawn, made tea quietly, and sat in the courtyard before the first call to prayer. My mother had her own order for everything. She washed the last utensils before bed, checked the stove twice, folded the thin bedding against the wall, and made sure the main door was latched with her own hand, even if one of us had already done it. My younger brother slept lightly and talked in his sleep sometimes, but only in short, meaningless sounds. I was in my early 20s and had come back from the city for a while after some work I had been counting on fell through. I remember that more than anything, life felt slowed down. It felt temporary. I told myself I would leave again soon. At night, the house had its own small set of sounds. The water in the clay pot settled. The wooden shelf in the front room ticked softly as it cooled. Sometimes a dog barked very far away, and because the village was so still, it seemed closer than it was. If the wind came from the fields, we heard the dry leaves of the guava tree against the outer wall. If there was no wind, there was almost nothing at all. The first time the door opened, I was not even fully awake. I had gone to sleep later than the others because the power had been out for half the evening, and I had been sitting by the weak light of a rechargeable lamp, reading old newspapers for no real reason. I remember lying down annoyed that I was not sleepy yet. Then, at some point in the night, I woke to a slow wooden sound, stretched thin and deliberate, like someone dragging the edge of a chair over cement, but very carefully so it would not scrape too loudly. For a few seconds, I did not understand what I was hearing. Then I realized it was the main door. That door had a very particular sound when it moved. The bottom edge sat a little unevenly because the threshold had sunk on one side. If you opened it quickly, it gave a rough pull and then released. If you opened it slowly, it made that low, patient wooden complaint that seemed to go on longer than it should. I sat up on my bedding and listened. The sound continued. Not hard, not violent, just steady. I looked toward the front room. There was only darkness there, with a little spill of moonlight from the high vent near the roof. My father was asleep on the other side of the room. My brother was near the wall. My mother was in the smaller sleeping area behind the curtain. No one else moved. When I got up and walked to the front, the door was open about the width of a man's shoulders. The lane outside was empty. The night looked normal. The neem leaves were still. There was no wind at all. The first thing I thought was that the latch had not been set properly. I closed it, checked the bolt, stood there for a moment, then went back to bed. I did not wake anyone because it seemed too small a thing. Old doors shifted, bolts slipped, rats pushed at things sometimes. The mind reaches for simple explanations first, especially in a house you know too well to suspect. In the morning, I told my mother that the door had somehow opened in the night. She frowned immediately and said, "I latched it myself." "I know," I said. "Maybe it didn't catch." "It caught," she said. My father was drinking tea from a steel cup. He did not look up when he said, The wood has swollen and dried too many times. If it sits wrong, it will move." "There was no wind." He shrugged. "Then it moved on its own." He said it the way men say things they do not want to spend any more thought on. My mother still went to the front and checked the door, lifting the bolt and dropping it twice. "It's fine," she said, but not with full conviction. If that had been the only time, I would have forgotten it. The second night is what made it stay with me. I woke again to the same sound. Slow, wooden, unhurried. This time I did not sit up right away. I lay there and listened until it stopped. Then I reached for the clock we kept on the shelf beside the wall. It was one of those cheap plastic clocks with a weak glow on the hands if it had been near light earlier in the day. I turned it toward me and saw the time. 2:13. I remember it clearly because later that number became part of everything. I went to the front again. The door was open, almost to the same width as the night before. The lane was empty again. No wind, no footsteps, no person disappearing into shadow. Nothing. I closed it, checked the bolt twice, and this time I stood with my hand on the wood for a while. It was cold, not unusually cold, just enough that I noticed it. I slept badly after that, and in the morning, I told them again. My father got up, went to the front, and spent longer with the latch. He tested the bolt, the lower edge, the hinges. He even took a small hammer and adjusted the metal catch with 3 careful taps. He said the problem was solved. That night, before sleeping, I watched my mother slide the bolt into place. Then I walked over and tugged at the door myself. It held. At 2:13, it opened. After that, the house changed for me, though not in any way I could point to during daylight. Once evening came, I found myself listening to small things more than I used to. I noticed how long it took my mother to finish in the kitchen. I noticed whether my father checked the outer courtyard before coming in. I noticed whether the hallway seemed darker than usual. By 10 at night, I would tell myself not to think about the door. By 11, I would already be aware of the clock. By midnight, I would be waiting for time to pass and not wanting it to pass. That was the worst part in the beginning. Not the opening itself, but the stretch before it. The feeling that the house was heading toward a moment it had already decided on. The event itself was never sudden. That made it harder. A sudden thing can be blamed on panic. This was always slow, always the same, always long enough for me to know exactly what I was hearing. On the 4th night, I stayed awake. I sat on my bedding with my back against the wall and watched the front room. The house was so still that I could hear my brother breathing through his nose. Somewhere outside, very far away, a buffalo chain knocked once against wood and then stopped. The minute hand on the wall clock moved with a faint plastic click I had never paid attention to before. At 2:12, I felt my mouth go dry. Nothing in the room had changed, but I already had the sensation that it was about to become occupied in a different way. At 2:13, the door began to open. I saw the bolt remain where it was. That is what I remember most. I remember staring at the metal and not understanding for a second what I was seeing. The inner latch had not leapt free. It had not dropped. The door moved anyway, as if the part of it that needed to obey the latch had simply stopped obeying. There was no forceful pull. The wood eased away from the frame a little at a time, quietly resisting, then giving. I stood up without realizing I had done it. I did not move toward it. I just watched. The opening widened. Beyond it, the lane looked gray and empty. Then the door stopped. Nothing stepped in, nothing visible. No shape, no animal, no person. only the open doorway and the night beyond it. I waited there for maybe a full minute, then 2. I am not sure. Eventually I walked forward, closed it, and slid the bolt hard into place with both hands. What changed after that was harder to talk about. I did not see anything enter the house, but every time the door opened, I felt with complete certainty that something had come in after it. Not from imagination in the ordinary sense, not from telling myself stories. It was the same kind of certainty you get when another person has entered a room behind you and you know it before they speak. The air did not change in any dramatic way. There was no smell at first, no cold rush, no sound of steps. But the inside of the house no longer felt like it belonged only to us. That feeling always began after the door opened, never before. I tried to say this to my father once and stopped halfway because of how unreasonable it sounded. He was mending a cracked bucket handle in the courtyard. I said, "When it opens, it feels as if someone comes inside." He did not lift his eyes from the wire in his hand, then stop waiting for it. "That's easy to say." He twisted the wire tighter. Some things get stronger when you give them attention. He might have meant the fear itself. He might have meant something else. With my father, it was sometimes hard to tell. Village people often say practical things in a tone that leaves room for other meanings. My mother's reaction was different. She did not dismiss it, but she did not want to discuss it in the open either. One afternoon, while she was kneading dough, she asked without looking at me, "After it opens, do you hear anything?" "No." "See anything?" "No." She nodded slowly, as if that answer mattered. Then she said, "Don't answer if anyone calls you at night from outside." "I'm not a child," I said. "I know," she said. "Still." That was the first time I understood she was not treating the door as a simple problem with wood and hinges anymore. My brother heard enough of these conversations to become uneasy, though he tried to act amused. For 2 nights, he insisted on staying awake with me. He lasted until about 1 on the first night, and even less on the second. Afterward, he admitted something I had not expected. "Sometimes I think someone walks in the hallway after it opens," he said, not looking at me. "But when I get up, nobody is there." I asked him why he had not told me before. He shrugged. "Because once I thought it was you." "When?" "The night before yesterday." He frowned, trying to remember. "I woke up after the door sound. I saw someone standing near the bathroom. I thought it was you because of the height. I even almost asked for water. Then the person moved toward the front, and when I sat up properly, you were asleep." I stared at him. "You didn't say anything then." I thought I had been dreaming. That same day, while we were eating lunch, my mother asked me why I had gone to the kitchen in the middle of the night and left the brass glass near the stove. I didn't. She looked at me for a second longer than normal. "Then who did?" I assumed she was mistaken until that evening, when I found the glass there myself. It had watermarks on the outside, as if it had been handled recently. My father said my mother must have left it and forgotten. My mother said nothing. My brother finished eating quickly and went out into the lane. These things, taken one by one, were small enough to ignore. Together they began to give the nights a different shape. It was not that the house became frightening all at once. It became uncertain. We started checking where each person was before sleeping, almost without admitting that we were doing it. My mother would call out from the kitchen if I was on the roof. My father, who had never cared whether the bathroom door was left slightly open, began shutting it fully every night. My brother stopped getting up in darkness without waking someone first. Once, when I came back in from the courtyard after washing my face, My mother startled at the sight of me in such an ordinary way that I knew she had mistaken me for something else in the half-light. The exact time never changed. 2:13. Not 2:12. Not 2:14. We checked against my phone, against the wall clock, against the cheap alarm clock in my parents' room. Always the same. My father called a carpenter from the neighboring village, more to satisfy the rest of us than because he believed it would help. The man took off one hinge, checked the frame, ran his fingers over the threshold, then gave a practical verdict. The door was old, yes, but not old in any special way. The latch was secure. The frame was slightly uneven, but not enough to make the door move against a locked bolt. He replaced the screws, adjusted the metal plate, and said if it opened now, it would be because someone had opened it. That night at 2:13, it opened. My father did not say anything. He just got up, walked to it, closed it, and went back to bed. The next day, my mother burned a little incense near the front room after sunset. She also recited quietly under her breath while she folded the bedding. She did not make a display of it. In village homes, people do such things without naming them. They are as normal as checking a lock or covering food from flies. I noticed that she no longer let the broom remain upright against the hallway wall at night. She laid it flat outside instead. I noticed, too, that she began keeping the small Quran from her shelf closer to where she slept. For 2 nights after that, the house seemed calmer, but the door still opened. And after it opened, that same strange occupancy settled inside. There was one particular kind of fear that came with repetition. If something terrible happens once, your mind breaks around the event itself. When something happens every night in the same slow way, your fear moves into the space before it. You start living with the approach of it. You feel the hour drawing near from far off, the way some people feel rain in their joints. I began to measure nights by the build-up toward 2:13. By 1:45, I listened more carefully. By 2 o'clock, I avoided going to the bathroom because I did not want to be in the hallway when it happened. By 2:10, even my breathing changed. And once the door had opened, whatever came after was in the house with us until dawn. I cannot prove that last part, but I know it. It showed itself mostly through people. At first, it was easy to dismiss those moments too. My father asked me one morning why I had been whispering outside by the water pot after midnight. I said I had not gotten up at all. He held my gaze, then looked away. He was not accusing me exactly. He just did not know whether to believe me. My mother once came back from the bathroom just before dawn and stopped near my bedding. "Why are you awake?" she asked. "I'm not," I mumbled automatically, half asleep. "No," she said after a pause. "Not you." When I opened my eyes fully, she was staring toward the front room. Another night, I woke because I heard my brother laugh softly in the hallway. It was not a happy laugh. It was a dry, private laugh, like someone responding to a joke that had not been spoken out loud. I sat up and listened. A few seconds later, I heard my brother snore beside the wall. I got up and looked. The hallway was empty. In the morning, he said he had dreamed of school. Sometimes the wrongness stayed into daylight, but only faintly. My mother would ask me a question she had already asked. My father would pause before answering, as if he needed a fraction of a second to remember who he was speaking to. My brother started looking over his shoulder while eating, not often, just once or twice a meal, as if someone had entered behind him quietly. The strangest change was that we all became careful about naming what we had seen. No one said, "I saw a person." No one said, "There was someone there." We said things like, "I thought you were awake," or "I heard movement," or I thought somebody had gone toward the back. It was easier that way. The language stayed ordinary, even when the nights had stopped being ordinary. One evening, after dinner, our neighbor's wife came by to return a bowl. She sat for tea and chatted with my mother in the front room. I was in the courtyard washing my hands, and I heard her say, in that casual village way that hides a serious question inside gossip, "Is everything all right? Your younger one looks pale these days." My mother said, "He isn't sleeping properly." The woman lowered her voice, but not enough. "Then don't let him answer if he hears his name outside at night." There was a short silence after that. When she left, my mother was annoyed with herself for speaking too freely. "People talk too much," she said. "But you didn't deny it," I said. She folded the empty tea cloth and did not answer. A few nights later, I tried an experiment of my own. I spread a thin line of ash just inside the threshold before sleeping. Nothing dramatic, just enough that a foot passing through would disturb it. I did not tell the others. At 2:13, the door opened as usual. I waited longer than normal before going to the front. The ash line was broken, but not with any clear footprint. It looked as though something had moved through it without carrying a full weight. There were smudges, light sweeps, and one incomplete impression near the side wall that might have been the edge of a heel or might have been nothing. I stared at it until my eyes watered. In the morning, before anyone else woke, I wiped the ash away. I did not want my mother to see it and begin thinking in that direction more than she already was. After that, I tied a length of thread from the bolt to a nail in the wall. My idea was childish, but fear makes people try things they would laugh at in daylight. At 2:13, the door opened, and in the morning, the thread was still there, hanging loose, unbroken. The bolt remained in place. I had no explanation for that at all. My father finally admitted, in his own way, that this was not a matter of hinges. He did not say it to me directly. He said it to my mother one afternoon when he thought I was outside. "From now on, once it is dark, no one sleeps alone," he said. There was no argument from her. We moved our bedding closer together after that. It sounds like a small change, but it altered the feeling of the room. The house became less like a home settling into sleep and more like a place under shared watch. Even when we said nothing, we were aware of one another more than before. If someone turned over, the others noticed. If someone got up to use the bathroom, they announced it softly. My mother began leaving the hallway light on until midnight, then later until 1. The bulb was weak and yellow. It did not actually make the house feel safer. It only let us see more clearly how still everything was. Once, around 2 in the morning, just a few minutes before the usual time, the light went out on its own. There was power in the rest of the house. Only that bulb failed. My father got up with a torch to change it the next day, but when he tested it in daylight, the bulb worked normally. That night, he left it off. There is a stage in fear where you stop searching for solutions and begin arranging yourself around the thing instead. That is where we were by then. I no longer expected the door to stop opening. I only wanted to know what happened after. I began staying in different places in the house as the hour approached. Sometimes I sat near the sleeping area and listened toward the front. Sometimes I stood by the stairs leading to the roof, where I could see both the hallway and the front room if I leaned slightly. Once I sat inside the bathroom with the light off like a fool, just to know whether the feeling of something entering would be different from there. It was not. In fact, it was worse, because from inside that small tiled room, when the door opened out in the front, it felt as if the whole house had inhaled and was holding it. During those nights, certain habits of my family became too distinct in my mind. I learned the exact rhythm of my father's cough, The way he cleared his throat before spitting into the sink in the morning. The soft, dragging step in my mother's right slipper. The way my brother pushed the bathroom latch with his thumb because he had broken a nail years ago and never stopped favoring that side. Once you know people by such small movements, seeing those movements in the wrong place feels worse than seeing a stranger. That began happening more often. I heard my mother's slipper drag in the hallway while she slept. I heard my father rinse his mouth in the bathroom while he snored on his bedding. I heard my brother whisper, "Move over," from the front room, while my brother lay with his face buried in his blanket beside me. Each time I checked, no one was there. It would have been easier if the house had become openly hostile. If doors slammed, if objects fell, if we saw something unmistakably unnatural, then our fear would at least have had a clear shape. Instead, the nights stayed close to ordinary. That was what made them hard to bear. The house remained our house. The cup was still on the shelf. The rolled bedding still leaned against the wall. The bathroom still smelled faintly of damp cement and soap. The roof still held a little warmth from the day. Only one thing had slipped out of place, and because it was only one thing, it touched everything. My mother was the first to say aloud what I had started to suspect. We were sitting in the kitchen in late afternoon, sorting lentils and picking out stones. My father had gone to the market. My brother was at the hand pump. My mother said, very quietly, "Sometimes at night, when one of you speaks to me, I wait before answering." I looked up. She kept her eyes on her hands. "Not because I am asleep, because I am listening to see if it is really one of you." I did not know what to say. After a moment, she added, "Last week, someone stood outside the bathroom while I was inside. I thought it was you. I asked what you wanted. There was no answer. When I came out, you were asleep." "That happened to me too," I said. "With Farid." She nodded. "So, from now on, if any of us has to get up at night, say who you are before you come near." When my father came home, she told him. He listened without interruption. Then he said, "Fine, we'll do that." He sounded tired, more than frightened. For maybe a week after that, we began announcing ourselves in darkness, and for a strange short time it helped. "It's me. I'm going to the bathroom. I'm coming from the roof." That kind of thing. Simple statements. Yet, even that soon grew uncomfortable, because after a few nights, it felt as though the house was learning our voices more carefully. One night, long after my brother had gone back to sleep, I heard his exact voice from the hallway say, "I'm getting water." The tone was flat, almost correct. I was so chilled by the calmness of it that I did not answer. In the morning, I asked my brother if he had gotten up in the night. "No," he said. "Why?" I told him. He turned pale enough that my mother noticed immediately and scolded us both for speaking of such things before breakfast. The cold weather deepened, and we shifted to sleeping on the roof again for a few nights when the rooms felt too close. People imagine rooftops as open and relieving, but in that period, the roof became just another part of the same house. The stairs rose from the hallway, and from up there, if you listened carefully, you could still hear the main door when it opened below. I liked the roof in childhood because it made the village feel honest. From there, a night was simply a night. You could see other roofs, sleeping charpoys, the dark outline of water tanks, someone's shirt left on a line, stars above all of it. But during those weeks, I stopped trusting the sight of familiar things. On the roof, I could hear the sound of the door below and imagine the house admitting something upward toward us, one step at a time. One night, I decided to sit on the stairs rather than on the roof itself. From the middle landing, I could see the dark hallway below, and, if I leaned back, the edge of our bedding on the roof above. My parents and brother were already asleep. A thin wind moved over the village, not enough to make noise, only enough to touch the skin of my hands. I sat there from a little before 2, listening. At 2:13, the door opened downstairs. I did not move. The sound rose through the stairwell more clearly than I expected. Slow wood, the faint catch at the bottom edge, then stillness. I waited for the familiar feeling that something had entered. It came. That house-occupied feeling settled around me so sharply that I gripped the side wall. Then, from above me on the roof, my father coughed in his sleep. A second later, from below me in the hallway, I heard the same cough. Not similar, not approximate. The same small chest-deep cough, the same pause after it, the same clearing of the throat. Every hair on my arms rose. I did not look down immediately. That is something people rarely understand about fear. Sometimes the body's first instinct is not to run or confront. It is to delay knowledge by a few seconds, because once you confirm what you are already afraid of, you cannot step back from it. I looked up first. I could see my father's outline under his blanket on the roof. He was lying on his side, facing away from me, still. Then I looked down. The hallway below was almost completely dark. I could not see a person. I could only see that the darkness in the space near the bathroom seemed occupied by a shape that was darker than the wall behind it. Not a full body, not enough for certainty. Just an interruption in the darkness, exactly where a man standing would be. I stayed where I was until my legs cramped. Eventually, without any sound I could point to, the presence below stopped feeling fixed. The house returned to its normal emptiness by degrees. I must have gone back to bed after that, but I do not remember doing it. The next morning, my father asked me why I looked ill. I nearly told him what I had heard, but he was already tired from not sleeping well himself, and something in me resisted putting that sound into daylight words. I just said I had been up late. From then on, I knew the thing in the house was not simply moving around in a stranger's way. It had begun using what belonged to us. That understanding made every small behavior harder to bear. If my mother paused too long before answering, I noticed. If my father came in from outside and his sandals were cleaner than they should have been, I noticed. If my brother called my name from another room and his voice sounded just slightly flattened, I noticed. I said very little. Fear can isolate a person even inside a family, because you begin to doubt not only what you have seen, but the people you would normally use to check yourself against. There was one afternoon when my mother and I were alone in the house, and I almost told her everything I had been noticing in daylight. The pauses, the repeated questions, the way my father sometimes looked at the hallway before entering a room, as if checking whether someone had just passed. But she was washing rice and humming very softly to herself, and she looked so tired and ordinary that I felt ashamed. I did not want to put suspicion into the room between us. Then that evening, as she was arranging the bedding, she asked, "Did you go up to the roof after noon?" "No." "There was someone walking up there." "Farid?" "He was at the shop." She kept folding, and neither of us spoke after that. The night of the realization came quietly, like all the others. My mother had not been feeling well for 2 days. Nothing serious, just stomach trouble. She was going to the bathroom more often than usual. My father slept early because he had to leave before sunrise to help a relative with some work in the fields. My brother was exhausted from hauling sacks at the grain store and was asleep almost before his blanket settled. I did not plan anything dramatic. I only meant to stay awake near the hallway again. The house was very still. There was no dog barking outside, no late motorcycle on the distant road, no sound from neighbors. Even the usual small ticking of cooling metal seemed absent. My mother got up once around 1:30 and went to the bathroom at the back. I heard the latch close behind her. I remember that detail with painful clarity because it is what kept me anchored to reality for the next few minutes. I knew she was in there. I had heard her go. I had heard the latch. I sat in the dark near the stairs, facing the front room. My father and brother were asleep behind me. The bathroom was down the hallway to my left. The main door was in front. When I checked the time on my phone, it was 2:11. I put the phone face down and waited. At 2:13, the main door began to open. Slowly, as always. The sound seemed quieter than usual. Maybe because I had heard it so many times by then that my body was already braced for it. The opening widened. The lane outside looked empty at first, only a strip of gray darkness and the shadow of the neem trunk. Then, a person stepped in. Not rushed, not cautious, simply stepped in, with the ease of someone returning to her own house after stepping out for a moment. My whole body locked. In the dimness, I could see enough to know the shape, the height, the drape of cloth over the head and shoulders. The person moved with a very slight drag in the right foot. My mother had that exact drag when she was tired. The figure did not look toward me. It came across the threshold, passed through the front room, and entered the hallway. As it did, I caught the faint smell of soap and damp cloth, exactly the smell that clung to my mother when she washed late at night. It passed within a few feet of where I sat. I saw the side of the face only in fragments, a cheek, the edge of the jaw, the shadow under the nose. Not enough to say the features were wrong. Worse than that. Enough to say they were almost correct. I could not breathe. The figure moved past me toward the back of the house with that same small familiar limp, calm as anything, as if it belonged there. And at that exact moment, from inside the bathroom behind it, my mother's voice came through the door. "Who is there?" The figure did not stop. My mother rattled the latch once from the inside and said my name in a low voice, not frightened yet, just uncertain. I cannot explain what happened inside me then. It was not a burst of panic. It was a kind of dropping away. A whole month of wrong glances, repeated questions, mistaken footsteps, voices in hallways, pauses before answering. Everything assembled itself at once into one understanding. Something had not been coming into the house as a stranger. It had been coming in already, wearing us. I think I made a sound then, because my mother called again, more sharply. "Who is outside?" The figure was already near the sleeping area where my father and brother lay. I stumbled to the bathroom and put my hand on the door. "It's me," I said, but even while saying it, I hated how inadequate those words sounded. My mother opened the door almost immediately. Her face was drawn and pale. Her hair was loose under her scarf. She looked exactly like herself, exactly as she should have. I took a step back and stared at her hard enough that she said my name as if I were the one behaving strangely. "There was," I began, and stopped. Because from the sleeping area, my father's voice said, clear and irritated with sleep, "Why are you two standing there?" My mother turned toward him. I turned too. My father was pushing himself up on one elbow from his bedding. My brother stirred beside him. Nothing looked wrong. Nothing looked missing. No extra person stood there. No corner was occupied by an obvious intruder. But I knew with complete certainty that the figure had gone that way. My mother walked past me first, toward the bedding, and I grabbed her wrist so hard she winced. "What happened?" she whispered. I did not know what to say in front of my father and brother, because how could I say it? I had seen her come in through the front door while she was in the bathroom. My father was awake now, looking from me to my mother with annoyed confusion. My brother sat up, rubbing his eyes. I searched their faces in the dark and suddenly realized I no longer knew what I was checking for. That frightened me more than the figure itself. If something could enter wearing a familiar body before the real body had even returned, then what exactly did familiarity mean anymore? A voice, a gait, a smell, a sleeping shape under a blanket. None of it was enough. I did not tell them the full truth that moment. I only said, "The door opened again." My father got up and went to the front. He closed it. When he came back, he avoided looking directly at me, which at the time I took as irritation. Later, I was not so sure. No one slept properly the rest of the night. At dawn, my mother asked me privately what I had seen. I told her, all of it. She listened without interrupting, and when I finished, she sat down on the edge of the bedding and covered her mouth with her hand. She did not accuse me of imagining it. She did not even ask if I was certain. After a long time, she said, "Then do not be alone with any of us at night, if you can help it." That sentence stayed with me because of the way she said any of us, not it, not someone, us. I wanted my father to react strongly when she repeated my story to him later. I wanted him to reject it or accept it, either one. Instead, he became very quiet. He stood near the courtyard wall with his hands behind his back for so long that my brother went out twice and came in again. Finally, he said, "From tonight, no one moves after midnight unless everyone is awake." My brother protested, asking what was going on. My mother snapped at him to stop asking questions. He fell silent, but he watched the rest of us carefully after that, as if trying to learn something from the spaces between our words. That night, all four of us stayed awake past midnight. The strange thing was that being together did not help as much as I had imagined. It only made the problem harder to place. We sat in the front room with one lantern and a thermos of tea. My father recited quietly for a while under his breath. My mother kept her shawl pulled tight around her face. My brother pretended bravery and failed at it. At 2:13, with all of us present and watching, the door opened. No one was near it. We all saw it. No one spoke. The lantern flame shook slightly, though there was no wind. The opening widened and stopped. The lane beyond remained empty. And still, even with all four of us gathered together, I felt the now familiar certainty that the house had received a fifth presence. That was when my brother whispered, in the smallest voice I had ever heard from him, "Then where is it?" No one answered, because the question had already moved through my mind in a worse form. If it had entered and all of us were sitting there in front of one another, then what exactly had come in? What was it taking hold of? What form did it need if it could already use our voices, our movements, our ordinary places in the house? After that night, something in our family life split in a quiet way. We continued with routine. Tea was made. Goats were fed. My father went to the fields. My mother washed clothes and scolded my brother for leaving his shirt in the courtyard. From outside, nothing had happened to us that anyone could name. But inside the house, we had all started measuring one another. My mother watched my father when he came in after sunset. My father asked my brother, more than once, where he had been even when he had plainly been in sight. My brother, who had once moved freely through every room in darkness, now stood outside doorways and called before entering. As for me, I began to dread daylight almost as much as night, because daylight gave those night doubts faces. There were moments I cannot forget. My mother handing me tea and holding the cup a second too long, as if checking something in my eyes. My father pausing at the foot of the stairs and looking up toward the roof Not like a man seeing if rain might come, but like a man expecting to find someone there. My brother once asking, too casually, "Were you standing outside when I came back from the shop?" And then going silent when I said no. The door kept opening each night. Sometimes we all heard it. Sometimes only one or two of us did. And that was somehow worse, because then we began doubting not only what we saw, but whether we had heard the same house. A local religious man came one afternoon after my mother quietly requested it through a relative. He recited in the front room, in the hallway, near the bathroom, and at the foot of the stairs. He was respectful and did not dramatize anything. Before leaving, he told my father to keep up prayer, to avoid speaking unnecessarily after midnight, and to recite before sleeping. He said houses can become troubled for reasons people do not understand. He did not promise a solution. That evening, my father seemed relieved simply to have done something. For 3 nights, the house felt slightly lighter, or perhaps we only wanted it to. On the 4th night, at 2:13, the door opened again. My father stopped suggesting remedies after that. He never said this openly, but I think he feared that trying to resist directly might force the thing into a clearer confrontation, and maybe he preferred not knowing to that. I wish I could say there was one final event after which it all ended or became fully visible. There was not. The strongest thing happened that night when I saw my mother come in while my real mother was in the bathroom. After that, the fear was no longer about proving anything. It was about enduring the idea of it. I left the village a month later when some work came through in the city. I did not want to leave my family in that house, but my father insisted. "Go," he said. "Your being here is not fixing anything." My mother packed food for me as if I were leaving under completely normal circumstances. At the bus stand, she held my arm for a moment and said, "If anyone comes to your room at night, make them speak before you look." She said it so quietly that the man selling tea beside us could not have heard. I asked her, "Has it changed since that night?" She only said, "Sleep with a light if you want." I called home often after that, at first every day, then every few days. No one described anything directly over the phone. Village people do not like putting such matters into long-distance words. My father would ask about work. My mother would ask if I was eating properly. My brother would complain about the cost of bus fare if I postponed visiting. The door was almost never mentioned. When I came home for Eid some months later, the house looked exactly the same. The same threshold, the same shelf, the same damp patch near the bathroom where the plaster never fully dried. My relief at seeing everything unchanged lasted only until evening. Because once darkness came, I felt it again. That waiting in the structure of the house, that approach toward a fixed point in the night. I told myself I was older now, farther from the events, less suggestible. At 2:13, the main door opened. I was sitting with my father when it happened. We both heard it. He did not move for a few seconds. Then he said, without looking at me, "It still does that. Still does that." As though we were discussing a leaking tap. "Does anyone ever see anything now?" I asked. He took time before answering. "It is better not to keep checking." That was the closest he ever came to admitting that the uncertainty had become permanent. I spent that night awake. My mother and brothers seemed normal. My father seemed normal. But normal had become a word with a crack in it. Near dawn, while my brothers slept and my father snored lightly, my mother went to the bathroom. I heard her latch it from inside. Even after all that time, the small metallic click of that latch sent a current through me. I sat very still until she came back. When she returned, I made her speak before I looked. She noticed what I was doing. She did not seem offended. She only said my name once, tiredly, and lay down. Years have passed since then. My father is gone now. My brother is married and lives in another part of the village. My mother still lives in that house, though she says she keeps mostly to 2 rooms now. If I ask directly about the door, she says it is better than before. Sometimes she says it only happens in certain seasons. Sometimes she says old houses have habits. Sometimes she changes the subject. I visit less often than I should. When I do visit, I never sleep deeply there. The house is quieter now because fewer people live in it, and that almost makes it worse. Familiar emptiness has a way of sharpening old fears. The hallway is the same. The bathroom is the same. The roof is the same. The sleeping area feels smaller. The main door has even been replaced once, but the frame remained. And yes, the new door opens too. Not every night I am there, not always when I am awake, but enough. The last time I stayed over, I kept my phone in my hand and the hallway light on. My mother laughed gently and told me I still had a city man's nerves. I laughed too. It was easier than telling her that some fears do not weaken. They only settle more quietly into a person. Around 2 in the morning, she got up to use the bathroom. I heard her footsteps. I heard the latch. I remained seated on my bedding, staring at the dark front room. At 2:13, the main door slowly opened. I did not go to it. I did not call out. I only listened to the sound I have heard for years now, that patient wooden movement, the house making room for something it has not learned to refuse. Then, from somewhere near the front room, in my mother's voice, very soft and almost affectionate, I heard, "Why are you awake?" At that exact moment, the bathroom latch clicked open behind me. I have never turned around so slowly in my life. By the time I looked back toward the front room, there was no one there. The door was still open. The night outside was empty as always. My mother came down the hallway, rubbing water from her hands onto her shawl. She asked what was wrong with my face. I said nothing. I still do not know whether silence is a kind of surrender or the only sensible thing left. What I know is this: when darkness settles in a quiet rural house and everything is exactly where it has always been, that is not always proof that only your family is inside. Sometimes a place learns your voices too well. Sometimes it learns the small private details of your steps, your cough, the way you stand in a doorway half asleep. And once that happens, the real fear is no longer the sound of the door opening. It is the moment after, when the house becomes full again, and you realize that recognition is no longer enough.